بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلاة ربي وسلامه ورحمته وبركاته على ذاك النبي الكريم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. As we continue this part two, as we said that we would resume after Salat al-Maghrib. So as we continue in the book, everyone, as we stopped at the paragraph, or rather we finished it, pertaining to what he mentioned, rahimallah, like we continue to mention and re-emphasize, that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, rahimallah, is citing the statement of Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. So we mentioned and said that the reason of why he mentioned this in this book was to establish that those who claim that they're upon Ash'ariyya in these days and times, which is in a lot of the Muslim world today, is that the affair is incorrect based upon the fact that the founder of this belief or this type of methodology as it pertains to Allah's names and attributes, whereas fundamentally they put forth the intellect over revelation, is baseless. To give the intellect as considered Masjid al-Hidayah, a source of guidance, that affair giving precedence to over the source of guidance being the Kitab and Sunnah, that what Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari was upon was that. He rejected that and he switched his fundamentals. So he went from that of saying that the aql or the intellect takes place over everything, and that the Kitab and Sunnah is shown on the aql, that the Kitab and Sunnah is shown on the intellect, and what the intellect accepts is what is accepted, and what it rejects is rejected. He left that and abandoned that. And he went back and switched it, which is the Kitab and Sunnah is Masdar al-Hidayah, it's the source of guidance. And the aql, the intellect, is shown to those affairs. The intellect and the mind is shown to the what? To the Kitab and Sunnah first. And what agrees with the Kitab and Sunnah is what's accepted. And what goes against the Kitab al-Sunnah is rejected. That is what he came, that's what he was upon, and then he switched the affair based upon all the books that he authored in this topic. And from them, as we said, Maqalat al-Islamiyyin wa Ikhtilaf al-Musallin. That was one of the books in which he clarified that he abandoned the methodology of old and returned back to what the Messenger of Allah was upon and his companions in regards to Allah's names and attributes, and the proper belief in regards to it, which is, if you want to say in its origin, the proper Islam and the pure Islam. And other books that he authored, which is Al-Ibana, in which we talked about that the Asha'ira worked diligently to try to falsely ascribe that book to him, which is a lie. You have so many books that affirm that this book has been accurately ascribed to him, to the point where even certain ulama have authored refutations of those who tried to belie its ascription to Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. From them is the great Imam Ibn Asakir, rahimahullah. There's a lot of the ulama in his book called, he said, Bayan Kadhib al-Muftari, the book clarification of the one who lied and fabricated upon Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, who lied upon him. Meaning, his last duration of his life, right before he died, he authored these two books, which is to let you know that's what he died upon. He died upon the methodology of the Salaf, meaning what the Messenger of Allah himself was about. And not only just the Messenger of Allah, the finality of all prophets and messengers, all of the prophets and the messengers believed this. All of the prophets and the messengers believed Allah was above. All of them, without one exception. All of the messengers, all the prophets, the messengers believed Allah was above. And even the affairs of paradise, when Adam was exited, even the affairs of what they were removed from paradise and had to descend to this dunya. So many proofs and evidences that show clearly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above is too many to be counted. The fact that Jesus, the son of Mary, was raised to the heavens, go figure, raised to the heavens when he saved them and foiled the plot of the Jews that tried to assassinate him, which in that story has numerous of rebuttals against numerous sects. From them is the Christians themselves, where he never was killed nor was he crucified. So you see the Christians wear this cross around their necks for no reason because he never died on it. So that renders the whole basis of Christianity baseless. In addition to the deviant sects from the Muslims who deviated in this regard of saying that Allah is not above, you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly said to Jesus, the son of Mary, Inni mutawaffika wa rafi'uka ilay wa mutahhiruka min alladhina kafaru. Verily, I'm going to take you at the death of sleep and I'm raising you to me. It says it clearly. Rafi'uka ilay. I'm raising you to me. Which is to let you know that Allah has raised Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam to the heavens. And he's still alive to this very moment because he never died in the first place. And he will descend at the last time, which is Allah knows best of its time is coming close and is drawing close. And Allah knows best of the exact time, of course. But the point of the matter is when he descends, he's descending from above with two angels descending with him, carrying him. Which is to let you know clearly, where's Allah? Huh? So all these affairs of going up, down, up, no brainer. So all these affairs of like we mentioned is what Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari, this is what he was establishing in his last books before he died. Rahimallah. He was establishing all of these facts and that he rejected what he was upon of old, as we said. So that was the last part of what we mentioned, everyone. And we'll move to the next paragraph, inshallah. So let's keep going. Let's looking up in the books. So Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, that he continues him, or in the next paragraph, وقال القاضي أبو بكر محمد بن الطيب الباقلاني محمد بن الطيب الباقلاني المتكلم وهو أفضل المتكلمين المنتسبين إلى الأشعري ليس فيهم مثله لا قبله ولا بعده قال في كتابه الإبانة تصنيفه فإن قال فالدليل على أن لله وجها ويدا قيل له قوله تعالى ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام وقوله تعالى ما منعك أن تسجد لما خلقت بيدي فأثبت لنفسه وجها ويدا فإن قال فما أنكرتم أن يكون وجهه ويده جارحة إذ كنتم لا تعقلون وجها ويدا إلا جارحة قلنا لا يجب هذا كما لا يجب إذا لم نعقل حيا عالما قادرا إلا جسما أن نقضي نحن وأنتم بذلك على الله سبحانه وتعالى وكما لا يجب في كل شيء كان قائما بذاته أن يكون جوهرا لأننا وإياكم لا نجد قائما بنفسه في شاهدنا. To the end of what he mentioned, rahimahullah. So now we're going to take the opportunity to explain this, because this needs a little clarity. I'm going to read it first and then we'll explain it. جيد. حيز. عرض. ما يقوم بغيره. ممتاز. جوهر. جيد. So let's keep going, everyone. So it says in the next paragraph that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah that he mentioned. Notice that there's an individual rahimahullah may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him, who was upon the madhab al-Asha'ira, but then he rejected it. Rather, you'll find that he was from the greatest of scholars. After the founder himself, who was Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. So notice Shaykh al-Islam went in order in regards to what he established of what we're mentioning here. Which is, number one, notice he was strategic. He started with the founder himself, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, where the founder himself totally rejected it. So if the founder himself rejected it, khalas, the whole methodology is done. It's over. If the whole founder, like we said, refuted what he was upon of old. And he wrote books, like we said, in depth and in detail, establishing this fact. Then, in addition to what we mentioned, also from their own prominent scholars that was revered and honored, that was upon this methodology, such as Muhammad ibn Tayyib al-Baqillani. Muhammad ibn Tayyib al-Baqillani. Notice Shaykh al-Islam called him al-Mutakallim, meaning he was from Ahl Kalam. He was from Ahl Kalam. He was from the people of rhetoric, and at one time he was affected by Greek philosophy and logic. So a person that deitizes the intellect by giving it precedence over Kitab and Sunnah, your salaf in that is Greek philosophers. It's not revelation. You put the ideas and the studies of Greek philosophers in front of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. From the aspects of those who are upon Socrates and Plato, and all of them who are affected by this type of rhetoric in which their books was translated into Arabic. It is sad and regretfully that some of the Muslims actually embraced it, adopted it, and translated it into the Arabic language until they tried to incorporate it and mix it with revelation. So they tried to bring something satanic and mix it with something that's pure light. And what did they get? What happened was absolute confusion. And ultimately it led to ilhad, mahad. It went to absolute, full-blown, unadulterated atheism. Because that's the goal of philosophy. You have to realize the goal of philosophy in deitizing the intellect, the ultimate goal of it is to deny there's a creator. So why would you believe it and why would you follow its methodology? So the ultimate goal of this whole affair is to put doubt in you as a Muslim of what you're upon. Number one, what makes you a Muslim in the first place is to believe of the existence of your creator and that he's distinguished for names and attributes. That if you believe in them, it will be an incentive for you to be an upright individual in this dunya. Why would you busy yourself with something that the ultimate goal of it is doubt? It doesn't make any sense. The ultimate natija, the doubt or the ultimate result of it is shak. Doubt in the existence of Rabb subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or what they call ilhad kulli or ilhad juz'i. What they call ilhad kulli, which is total denial, or juz'i, or partial denial, which is denying some of his names and attributes. And ascribing to Allah deficiencies. Deficiencies, and that He subhanahu wa ta'ala has some form of weaknesses or deficiencies or characteristics that are fully rejected. All of those matters, like we mentioned, doesn't make sense that one would busy themselves with ilm al-kalam, with the affair of philosophy and logic and deitizing your intellect over what Allah has sent down. If the ultimate result is to instill doubt in your heart concerning your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the reason why you'll find that the majority of the scholars, so-called, that busy themselves, the ultimate result, if you look to their speech, they started doubting the existence of Allah. That's the result. Look to the most prominent of those who did not abandon what Shaykh al-Islam is saying here. They didn't abandon, they stayed upon it. If you read some of the stories of it, it's scary what they used to say. Some of their followers, they would say to them, أَتُؤْمِنُوا بِأَنَّ هُنَاكَ رَبٍّ فقال نعم يا شيخي طبعا قال احمد ربك ولكن كأنه ليش هو يشك في وجوده. He said to his students, do you believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you believe in that? The existence of Allah? He said, of course, my Lord, of course, Shaykh, of course. He said, praise Allah. What do you think he's saying? I doubt that. Why? Because he busied himself with what, everyone? Philosophy and logic. And still to this day, if you look to philosophy and logic and deitizing the intellect, what's the ultimate goal of it? To deny what? To deny there's an existence of a creator. That everything has a rational explanation of why it happened or why it's there. And if it's not something tangible by the eyes and the senses, we don't believe in it. We reject it. That's why you'll find that some of the scholars of philosophy that busied themselves, from them was Fakhr Razi. He said in his poetry, a couple of Shahrastani poetry, where he said, I think you can start with Shahrastani, I think it's Fakhr Razi, you start with this one. نهاية الإقدام العقولي نهاية إقدام العقول عقال وأكثر سعي العالمين ضلال وأرواحنا في وحشة من جسومنا وغاية دنيانا أذى ووبال ولم نستفد من بحثنا طول عمرنا سوى أن جمعنا فيه قيل وقالوا. He said about it in the poetry. He said نهاية إقدام العقول عقال. The end result of the uqul of them intellects is iqal. Meaning things are just totally what? Difficult. It's unexplainable. In doubt. And majority of the whole world is in misguidance. وَأَكْثَرَ الْعَالَمِينَ فِي ضَلَالُ. Where he says وَأَكْثَرَ الْعَالِمِينَ فِي ضَلَالُ. But the majority of the world are in misguidance. So he said at the end of the poetry, I forget we go over again. نهاية إقدام العقول عقال وأكثر السعي العالمين ضلال وأرواحنا في وحشة من جسومنا وغاية دنيانا أذى ووبال ولم نستفد من بحثنا طول عمرنا في سوى أن جمعنا فيه قيل وقالوا. He said all the different types of time we wasted of this argument and this argument and that argument. If you notice philosophers, there's no end to it. They're always arguing. This hujjah, this argument, this argument, this argument. To the ultimate end of it, it was just what? We just gathered between he said, she said, he said, he said, going back and forth. Wasted time. Another poetry, and I think that was Fakhr Razi. Shahrastani said, لقد طفت بين المعاهد كلها وسيرت نظري بين تلك المعالم ولم أرى إلا واضعا كف حائري على ذقن أو قارعا سن نادم. I think that was for Shahrastani. This was Fakhr Razi was the first one. I think Shahrastani is the second. Where he said لقد طفت بين المعاهد كلها لقد طفت بين المعاهد كلها وسيرت نظري بين تلك المعالم ولم أرى إلا واضعا كف حائري على ذقن أو قارعا سن النادم. That I did not go between all those different ideologies of the ilm al-kalam. And I put my eyes and looked in all of those books, all of them. وسيرت نظري بين تلك المعالم ولم أرى إلا واضعا كف حائري على ذقن. I didn't put anything except my hand on my chin out of bewilderment and being confused. And becoming older, just becoming more confused and regretting in this matter. So all of them told the people that was busying themselves with this nonsense that the ultimate goal was doubting Allah. And to the point where some of them even died in a state where they had doubt concerning Allah's existence. Why in the world would a Muslim busy himself with that nonsense? And anything that's connected with it. From its methodologies, its ideologies, its terminologies. Why would you want to have any form of connection with it at all? If this is the end result of it. That you're going to have doubt concerning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And reject His names and attributes. That is from the greatest of knowledge that makes a Muslim upright in his life. Is to believe that your Lord has names and attributes that contributes to knowing the veneration that He deserves subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowing how powerful He is, all-hearing, powerful. All-seeing, powerful. All-wise, powerful. Never dies, no beginning, powerful. All ending, powerful. You believe that's an incentive to push you to be upright, to be an obedient servant to him. Because when you embrace this type of belief, and you know how powerful and dominant he is, subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of these are matters that will push you into being submissive to him, into being obedient to him, and to knowing that he, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the one that deserves to be worshipped alone. By this type of belief that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had taught his companions and all of the other prophets and messengers, like we said. In addition to what we mentioned of the malaika, as we said, the malaika, the angels also believe that Allah is above. And they also know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserves to be worshipped. And they also believe in paradise and hell. And they also believe in the qadr. And they also believe in tawheed. And they also disbelieve in shirk. And they also believe that Allah is above. And it's all ayat in the Quran that establishes this fact. And they also believe in the names and attributes of Allah. So the angels are all misguided too, huh? The angels misguided, the prophets misguided. The angels instinctively know where to go. What does the ayah say in Surah Al-Ma'arij? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تَعْرُجُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالرُّوحُ إِلَيْهِ في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة فاصبر صبرا جميلا. The Ruh was Jibreel, and the angels ascend to him in a time frame of what you will understand, O human beings, 50,000 years. Where's all this distance? Where is it? It's everywhere. 50,000 years. The angels ascend to him. I guess the angels are confused based upon the logic of the Asha'ira and those who have been affected by Greek philosophy. I guess the angels don't know what they're doing either. The angels confused. They have wrong aqidah too, huh? This is all nonsense. This is all absurd. So based upon that, everyone, as we mentioned, as we move to the next affair pertaining to Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Tayyib al-Baqillani, who was from the revered scholars of the Asha'ira after the founder himself, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. To the point where even Shaykh al-Islam said about him, he was the most virtuous of them, that ascribed to Ash'ari. And it wasn't anyone from amongst them that was similar to him, not before nor after. وقال في كتابه الإبانة. He said in his book called Al-Ibana, meaning Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari mentioned him also. Muhammad ibn Tayyib al-Baqillani. Al-Baqillani. He said about him, فَإِنْ قَالَ قَائِلٌ. If a person said, what's the evidence that Allah belongs to him a face and a hand? It is said to him the ayah, which is a Surah Al-Rahman. We're going to get to this because it's something else. I'm going to skip past it and I'm going to get to the new one because I think we repeated this 10 times. Right, so let's keep going. So it said in the ayah, which is Surah Al-Rahman, ayah number 27. The face of your Lord will remain possessor of majesty and honor. The statement of Allah also in Surah Al-Sad, ayah 75, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Iblis when he rebuked him, what prevented you from prostrating to the one I created with my two hands? So Allah has affirmed for himself in these verses what? A face in the one before, the verse before. Surah Al-Rahman, ayah number 27. Allah affirmed what? Face. In Surah Al-Sad, Allah affirmed what? Two hands. Good. فإن قال قائل فإن قال فما أنكرتم أن يكون وجهه ويده جارحة. This is what we have to explain. We'll explain it in a minute. I'm just reading the paragraph. If a person said, you rejected that Allah will have a face and a hand and it being a jariha. We'll talk about this word because we have to dissect it. Jariha. Jariha means like a body part. Body part. Jariha. Hence, you do not understand, or you do not rationalize or understand a wajh or hand, except that it has to be a what? Body part. Except there has to be a body part. We'll talk about this in a minute. We mentioned on so many occasions, and I mentioned this and I mentioned on many occasions, the words in which the people of innovation had brought to cause confusion. And it all came from Greek philosophy. It stemmed from their arenas and their terminologies. That Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah came and dissected all of these words and said that, number one, these words are not to be used as it pertains to Allah. Why? Because it causes confusion. In addition to what it carries of a correct meaning and a false meaning. Both. So number one, these words should not be used because it confuses the Muslim. And it has not come in Kitab al-Sunnah, the usage of these type of words. So the affair that's an obligation upon every Muslim is to cling to and restrict himself to what Allah mentions in His book, in the Kitab al-Sunnah, in regards to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. What of Ahl Ilm came with extra clarity when the people of Batil started using these words and they became dominant and prevalent and widespread. That's when they had to come with other clarification. It's similar to the word Muslim. Exact same methodology. During the time of the Messenger of Allah and the companions and the generations that came, they did not have to bring al-qab. They didn't have to bring new names to identify themselves. Why? Because all of the Muslims were upon one aqidah. So clarity in regards to using a name to stand out was not needed until deviation started to what? Creep in. And the confusion set in. By the Muslims abandoning the pure Islam. And they started adopting false notions and false beliefs and creeds. Which now the Muslims were forced to now come with names to identify themselves, to let them know that we are not upon with those Muslims that ascribe to Islam externally, even though they say it, but they're not upon the proper understanding of it. We identify ourselves to separate ourselves by making it clear, by coming with these type of names, such as we said, Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Ahlul Athar, Salafiyun. All of those are names to let the people know that we are making ourselves separate and distinct from those who are not practicing and believing in Islam purely. When the affairs of deviation and innovations, when they crept in, that's when the Muslims had to start using these names to make themselves clear and distinct, so the Muslims who embraced Islam can know that they are the ones that are upon the haqq. And they are the ones that Islam needs to be learned from, because they're trying to call to it, teach it, and be upon it purely. Those are the people who the non-Muslims, when they embrace Islam, has to be upon. And that's what they have to learn. And if they're not upon that affair, they can easily fall to misguidance. Rather, you'll find that even Sheikh Salih Fawzan, hafidhullah wa ra'ah, he says certain people enter the fold of Islam go into one form of kufr to another one. When you embrace Islam and you left off worshiping the creation, and then you start worshiping the dead, based upon what people of Tasawwuf and from the Rawafid and the Shia are upon, which is worshiping dead people. You went from one aspect of kufr to what? Another aspect of it. Why would you warn against it? Do you have any? Did you bring your bills with you? Do you have any of the? Do you have any electronic bills with you? You don't have none, do you? You don't have any? I thought I could have swore I brought some with me. No, I didn't bring it. Play, let's keep going. So why wouldn't you warn from it? Why wouldn't you? The whole basis of what makes you Muslim has been destroyed at that one point when you worship the dead. Everything after that is irrelevant. From Hajj, Umrah, your 5 prayers, to everything. The whole foundation of Islam has been destroyed when you worship the dead and raise your hands to other than Allah. Why would you warn against it? And why, when you want to separate yourself and identify yourself, to be away from that filth? That's the reason why the Muslims came with these type of names for the other people to identify that they are the ones that are trying to hold steadfast to what's correct. In addition to the other affairs and clarity that had to be brought because of Al-Batil again. So blame the people of falsehood for all this confusion. Don't blame the people of Sunnah. Blame the people of who? Batil. But you know they like to play the games. What they'll do, they like to play the manipulative psychological game, which is projection. Project on the people of truth. It's your fault. It's your fault. Wahhabis. Well, I never called myself Wahhabi. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, first of all, going back to Imam Ahmed, the people who were upon the haqq at that time was called Hanbali. Then the time of what happened with Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, they tried to ascribe the correct belief in Islam to him too. Then the third came. The third revival of calling the people away from polytheism and unifying Allah in His worship and calling to the pure Islam became Wahhabism. Who called him his dawah that? The enemies did. He never called himself that. Y'all use that name so the people can what? Be alienated to go away from him, like as if he brought something new to the religion. They're the ones that put their names on these type of great scholars who didn't call except to the pure Islam. And that's what the people are making war against, and that's what they're calling the people away from. And that's what they're scared of. That if the Muslims go back to those type of affairs, that's when they'll become dominant and strong. That's what they're afraid of, and that's the reason why day and night they're trying to alienate them away from the pure Islam by utilizing these type of names and these type of what? This type of rhetoric. So they wouldn't embrace it. But if you look to what they're upon, they're calling to the monotheism of Allah. They're calling to what we're talking about right now, which is to affirm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what He affirmed for Himself. And what His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was His trustworthy one over revelation, inform about Allah. Is there anything that someone is saying wrong? Pure Islam. If you hear what we're saying here, this is the pure Islam. That's what every Muslim wants to be upon. They don't want to be upon some deviated version or some tainted version or some perverted version. And which, as a result of embracing that nonsense, you will be confused as a Muslim. And eventually, you'll start doubting your religion. Because what they bring of falsehood, the final result of it is doubt and confusion. That's the reason why we speak against it. Because you see what happens to people when they're upon those ways, who worship the dead, who deny that Allah is above. You look to their religion, these people are losing their religion. Why? Because these type of affairs don't bring except confusion, doubt, and possibly apostation, and abandon Islam or going back to kufr. Based upon these affairs, don't bring any doubt within oneself. Don't bring any doubt, except that he's doubtful. He's a Muslim walking around with no quality to himself. He's just quantity because he doubts what he's upon. This type of affair, like we said, everyone, this is the ending result of this type of nonsense. This is why Shaykh al-Islam was clarifying the correct aqeedah in this type of book here. And not only that, he's bringing the correct proof to establish it by bringing the actual founders of these type of methodologies. They even abandoned it. So if the actual scholar who established it abandoned it, what would make you think that what you're upon is correct? If he abandoned it, he refuted it, he rejected it, he even wrote books going against it to let you know that is what? It's incorrect. In addition to this individual who's from, regardless of, excuse me, I shouldn't say individual, astaghfirullah, and he returned back to the methodology of the Salaf also, rahimahullah. Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Tayyib al-Baqilani, rahimahullah, excuse me. My apologies. So he goes on to say that the last matter, and that's what we're to talk about, the word jariha, body parts. Those words are to be what, everyone? Abandoned. Don't even use it. But we're going to clarify the details of this. Let's keep going. قلنا لا يجب هذا كما لا يجب إذا لم نعقل حيا عالما قادرا إلا جسما. He's using the words again. He said that's not obligatory. Just as it's not obligatory that if we don't so-called rationalize or understand life, all knowledgeable, all able, except what comes to the mind is a body. Jism. We'll talk about this in a minute, don't worry. أن نقضي نحن وأنتم بذلك على الله. That we now have judged and what you have said upon Allah. These type of words. And we'll talk about this, don't worry. كما لا يجب في كل شيء. Just as it's not obligatory in everything. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's qa'im bidhatih. Meaning He subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has that essence. He Himself alone. And we're going to talk about the word Johar. The word is, all these words are mustalahat falsafiyah. All of them. Johar, Ard, Jism, Hayyiz. All those words we'll talk about in a minute. We'll explain it. So notice again what happened, what caused the confusion is all of these affairs that are from the outside non-Muslims were brought into Islam. And this is the thing that the Muslims have to realize. All the affairs of confusion, division came from the non-Muslims. All of it. Until this very day. All of the confusion in the Gulf and in the Northeast, in the Middle East, who's the one that started the nonsense? Non-Muslims. The non-Muslims involved in the affairs of the Muslims come in, and they're the ones that cause all the what? Chaos. Kuffar. Fine. Notice that everything that was foreign, that was introduced in Islam, is what caused the division and caused the what? The confusion. Philosophy originally came from where? The Greeks. Mustalahat Philosophiya, Yunaniya. Came from where? The Greeks. They the one that brought these words in. That's when the Muslims became divided, and that's when they became what? Confused. So they brought these words such as body part, jadiha, ard, jawhar. We're going to explain all this. All of them are what they call mustalahat falsafiyya. All of them are called philosophical terminologies. Philosophical terminology. Don't worry, we'll explain in a minute. He said, لِأَنَّا وَإِيَّاكُمْ لَا نَجِدُ قَائِمًا بِنَفْسِهِ فِي شَاهِدِنَا إِلَّا كَذَلِكَ. He said, because us and you, we do not see, nor do we find something that is established by itself in its essence and what we see, except that it's like that. Don't worry, all this I'm going to clarify, don't worry. Likewise, the answer to them, قالوا فيجب أن يكون علمه وحياته وكلامه وسمعه وبصره وسائر صفاته عرضا واعتلوا بالوجود. All this I'll explain in a minute. I'm going to explain it. Matter of fact, let me start explaining it now. This is nice. So explain the whole paragraph. Let's start now. How much time we got left? 10. Good. Excellent. طيب. The first thing before we start explaining it, let's explain some of these so-called philosophical terminologies that was used here. The word Johar in the Arabic language, everyone. The word Johar, just to keep it simple. I'm not going to go too into depth. The word Johar has a lot of meanings, but what is in here contextually here is that a Johar is something. Let me read this one because this is easy. I don't want to. There. So keep it there. Good. So the word Johar, everyone, or matter of fact, let's start with the word Ard. So they saying either that the affair of Allah is either what they call Ard or Arad or Johar. وكل ما كان قائما بنفسه يقال له جوهر. So the first thing is that the word Johar in the Arabic language or in the philosophical term is something that's qa'im bi nafsi, meaning that it's established. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't need anything else. It's independent, basically. So what is qa'im bi nafsi is called Johar. So it's a philosophical terminology. The word Ard is another philosophical terminology. You guys writing this down? Write it down, I might test you on it. The word Jawhar means something that does not need anything else. It's established, independent of everything. لا يحتاج إلى غيره. قائم بنفسه. Established on its own, doesn't need anything. That's the word what? Jawhar. The word arud in the Arabic language, that it means that which depends on another thing to exist. That's the word arud. So arud, what does that mean again? Something that which needs what? It depends on another thing to exist. So arud is the opposite of what? Exactly. That's it. It's a little bit more depth in that, but when you understood that, that's enough. That's all you need to know. If you understand and grasp those 2 points, now I can start explaining. So everyone understood those 2 points or not? So once you understood that, now I can explain to you, but that's easy. Simple. First, number one, before we start explaining, again, these words are not to be used as it pertains to Allah. Is it clear? No. As it pertains to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these words are not to be what? Used. As it pertains to Allah. You can use a common language. Common language is something different. We're talking about Allah Himself. Is it clear? Whether it be Jawhar, Ard, Jiha, Jism, Jadiha, Hayyiz, all of those matters, all those words. That's what we're going to explain in a minute. All those different words. So those 3 points, if you understood it, you understand the lesson. So let's go back to the beginning of the paragraph. I put it in here. I wrote it. I'm trying to find where I wrote it at. I wrote it down. I'm trying to find where I wrote it down. Oh, because Hayyiz. طيب. So in that instance, so like we mentioned, let's go back to the beginning statement of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah. He said that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah mentioned Muhammad bin Tayyib al-Baqillani. Like we mentioned, it said Baqillani was from the people of the Ilm al-Kalam. So if I test you on this is how you explain it. He was mutakallim, meaning كان مشتغلا بعلم الكلام وكان من أهله. He was from its people. However, he does have books in usul. He's an usuli. متضلع في المعقولات وفي المنقولات. He was an individual that was well established in al-ma'qulat, in affairs of intellect or understandings of the intellect, or manqulat, and affairs that were conveyed in the Kitab al-Sunnah. However, what had took as dominance upon him is that he ascribed to al-Ash'ariyah in its origin. So he ascribed to Ash'ariyah kullabiyah. He ascribed to Ash'ariyah kullabiyah, as we mentioned. Despite of him, and this is his background and what he was known for, despite of this being his circumstance, he's still, in the aspect of some of the names and attributes of Allah, you'll find that he was on point. Before he made Tawbah, and that we'll talk about that in a minute, of what he, in the end, finally returned back to what was correct. But the point of the matter is, some of the characteristics of Allah, you'll find that when he brought clarification in that matter, it was absolutely what? On point and correct. So in the instance where Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah كعادته يتبع الصفات التي يثبتها بعض كبار الأشاعرة. From the affair in which you'll find Shaykh al-Islam had habitually done, especially in this book here, the characteristics in which some of the major revered scholars of the Asha'ira, and he's talking about their revered scholars, relying on them and what they conveyed in order to establish the proof that what we're upon, this is also what your own scholar is saying. To use it as a what? An extra proof against them. That your own scholar abandoned this. This is your own scholar making Toba, and he's following the people of the truth in this regard. So he's conveying it, affirming it, and at the same time, he's mentioning this virtue in regards to the knowledge and the status that he had amongst them, of course. That which formed what they call siyasat al-da'wah. That what he utilized in order to establish the truth and bring the people who are upon that way to the truth. Using this type of matter and this type of methodology. So you'll find that Shaykh al-Islam and a lot of the people who are upon this way, that they were excused, meaning at his time, from the common folk that were affected, and the common folk that were deluded or beguiled or led astray in this regard, based upon the fact that a lot of them did not know, or they were excused because of their ignorance or the evil scholars that led them astray. And this is that what they had of knowledge, and they did not know other than that. But for that reason, لذلك يؤخذ ما لديهم الحق والصواب وما وافقوا فيه السلف يترك باقي كلامهم. In that instance, he utilized this in order as a proof to establish upon them of the truth, of course, of what they had been upon and what they agreed of following the Salafid. And the rest of what they're upon, of course, was abandoned. Without saying some type of form of disparagement in this regard, except from the aspect of clarification in which he did. Notice that Shaykh al-Islam, if you look in the paragraph, he called him what, everyone? Mutakallim. Meaning he was from the people of what? Kalam. He made it clear. So Shaykh al-Islam didn't just leave it open. He said he made it clear that he was from those who were busied themselves with that type of matter, which is an ilm al-kalam. But at the same time, also establishing, what's time now? It's time, it's in? Oh, تفضل. You want to go? You want to call it? You want to call you then again? Go. You want to call it again? I was going to. تفضل. No, you're right.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Oh, I didn't even know it was raining. Wow.
أشهد أن
It was raining like that? Wow.
لا إله إلا الله.
SubhanAllah. Shouldn't have done
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر.
الله أكبر الله.
لا إله إلا الله.
التي محمد الوصية والفضيلة وبعث المقام محمد الذي وعده. جيد ممتاز. طيب, so like we mentioned, everyone, you'll find that he did not use disparagement in this matter, like some form of tajrih or jarh, that disparagement that he utilized in this type of place, even though Shaykh al-Islam made it clear. He said he was an individual that was from Ahl Kalam. He said, Fulan mutakallim, meaning he was from their people, min Ahl Kalam. He was not from the people of Hadith or people of Al-Athariyin, وَلَيْسَ مِنَ الْمُحَدِّثِينَ. He was not from the people of Hadith However, he was mutakallim, meaning min ulama al-kalam. He was from the people of rhetoric. So al-Baqillani, as we said, he was given tawfiq and these characteristics and what we're going to speak about. So we're going to give the introduction to this. So على كلام شيخ الإسلام فهو أفضل من إمام الحرمين الجويني. So keep in mind is what we mentioned before we speak in detail what we're going to say, that he, relatively speaking, in regards to the scholars of the Asha'ira, he was the best of them, meaning from amongst them, relatively speaking, and at the same time, he clarified that he was from them. He said mutakallim. However, utilizing this type of method, when you see that someone, especially that has went astray in certain affairs, from the strategies that one can use is to say, this is what your such and such scholar is upon. Or such and such made Toba, he abandoned it. Or such and such was upon the way of Ahl Sunnah's regard, so why are you not following it? Or you can even use the speech of somebody of old. You could say, this is what you were saying 20 years ago, now you're saying something different. Why is this? What is this type of contradiction? These type of methods were utilized to establish the haqq, and it can be utilized in that regard. Similar. To say such and such is agreeing with us, this is your own revered scholar saying this. Here's another revered scholar of yours saying this also. So you saying that what I'm calling to is something new is baseless, based upon the fact that this affair is known. And in regards to what we're mentioning and trying to establish, he's following us in it. He's even following us in this regard. So like we mentioned, he said that Al-Baqillani, you'll find that he was more virtuous than the so-called Imam al-Haramain, which we'll talk about him next class, al-Juwayni. These are names that one needs to familiarize themselves with. When we'll, next class, which is tomorrow, we'll talk about this more, because I think some of us forgot of who was al-Juwayni, which they called him Imam al-Haramain. Why they called him that, which we'll talk about tomorrow. Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, Baqillani was better than him. So keep that in mind. Al-Baqillani was more virtuous than al-Juwayni, who was the so-called Imam al-Haramain, but he wasn't. As we'll talk about tomorrow. With the Shafi'iyah, they hold him or held him in high esteem. Who? Al-Juwayni. Juwayni, everyone, comprises of the father and the son. There was a son called Juwayni, and then they had the father, and then they had the son who was also called Juwayni. There's two. We'll clarify that tomorrow in detail. Don't worry. The point of the matter is that Al-Juwayni, if you look to the Shafi'iyah, those who followed the madhab al-Shafi'i, he was from their esteem of scholars, of who they held in high esteem, Al-Juwayni. So keep in mind, we're talking about Muhammad al-Baqillani, and we're also talking about how he was more virtuous than Al-Juwayni. He also, if we'll speak about tomorrow, also made Tawbah from Ilm al-Kalam, from busying himself with the speech of rhetoric. All of that we'll clarify, like we said, in its time. It's going to come. So the affair with strange is that the Shafi'iyah also go to the extremes of venerating or respecting or revering Al-Juwayni, to the point where some of them say, we'll talk about this tomorrow, if there was another prophet after the message of Allah, it would have been Al-Juwayni. لو كان بعد النبي نبي آخر لكان الجويني. That's what they say. Who is Juwayni here? Abdul Malik Abil Ma'ali. They called him Imam al-Haramain. And like we mentioned, we'll talk about the detail of this again tomorrow. These type of affairs, everyone, you have to know. Like we mentioned, these are classes, you have to write this stuff down. These are not lectures. This is history. You need to know. We want you to go home, memorize it, understand it, and then you'll be tested on it. You will be tested, and I'll give you some questions in this regard. The point of what we're mentioning here, this is the type of extremes that they raise Abu al-Ma'ali Abdul Malik al-Juwaini, who they called Imam al-Haramain. So the person who was more knowledgeable, relatively speaking, in this regard was Muhammad ibn al-Tayyib al-Baqillani, to the point where he said there was no one similar to him before or after, meaning he was better than who? Imam al-Haramain al-Juwaini. And like we said, the details will come tomorrow, inshallah. We'll talk about it in depth. But Kalam al-Juwaini, this who we're speaking about is the son, not the father. The father also has his story, which we'll mention. However, the son was more virtuous, in relatively speaking, than the father. But however, as we said, al-Baqillani likewise was better than them, all of them. And what we'll discuss is the Ruju' al-Juwaini, the son who came back and returned back to the methodology of the Salaf also. And when he made Tawbah and he abandoned Ilm al-Kalam. So that's something that, like we said, tomorrow we'll open up the topic. The point of the matter is what we're saying here, of the most virtuous in regards to them, meaning the Asha'ira, was Muhammad ibn al-Tayyib al-Baqillani. And he clarified in his book called Al-Ibana, saying about these matters of which we're mentioning now, and establishing that he believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a face that befit him. And it did not mean something else. That he twisted the meaning by saying that it means, for example, that it doesn't mean face, it means his essence. And we already mentioned last class that that's incorrect. In addition to him affirming that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, he also established that in those ayats and those verses that we also mentioned. So now let's get to the statement, and this is where we'll stop, inshallah. We got 10 minutes. Got a couple more minutes. So we'll mention the statement. We'll give a little bit of explanation and commentary in this, and then we'll stop. Then we will resume tomorrow, inshallah. So فإن قال فما أنكرتم أن يكون وجهه ويده جارحة إذ كنتم لا تعقلون وجها ويدا إلا جارحة. So he said, if a person says of what you rejected of his face and his hand being a body part, here we go with the usage of those words again. Jariha. Hence that nothing can be understood of a face nor a hand except that what comes to the mind is a what? Is a human being or a body part of a human being. Who's addressed, or rather, who's the one that's given this question? Is it Baqillani or someone that was affected by the ideologies of the Mu'tazila? Which one? The one who was affected by what? Ideologies of the Mu'tazila, not Baqillani. The one who was affected by i'tizal, he's the one that's giving this question or posing this question here. He's the one giving it. So هذا السؤال يوجهه معتزلي يريد يجعله مشبها. So he's the one now posing this question, and he wants you to fall into his trap. Set you up so you can fall into what they think is tashbih, resemblance. So he's saying here, why do you reject that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a face, or the face of Allah, the hand of Allah? Because nothing can be understood in the mind, again, or the intellect, except the body part, like the hand of a what? Human being, or the faces of what? Human being. That nothing can be understood except this. Is that true? No. That's what we'll talk about again in detail tomorrow, because I see you guys' minds have become tired. So that's the reason why I got to start with this fresh tomorrow. But at any rate, that's what he's saying here. The person who's been affected by the Mu'tazila, they're saying there's no way that we can establish these meanings for Allah. Face, hand, except the only thing that can be comprehended is what? It's a body part. That's the only thing that can be what? Understood from this. Is that correct? No. So they're saying that that's what our minds can accept. Anything that the body resembles, that's the only thing that our minds can understand when you say yed or hand or what have you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we mentioned, has addressed us of what we understand. وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْقِلُونَ يَدًا إِلَّا جَارِحًا. And to the point where the only thing that you can understand from hand is a what? Is a so-called hand of the body or body part. Even in face, same thing. In the aspect of what we've been addressed to understand the general meaning. Whereas, as we know, there's even differences amongst the creation in regards to their faces, in regards to their hands, in regards to other affairs. There's tafawut and differences even amongst the creation. And we know that in aspects where there are creatures that have the characteristics of certain matters, and they don't even have those type of needs, as we mentioned, of the human beings to have a characteristic. A person is saying, what are you talking about? We talked about this already. Such as a rock. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he heard a rock give salams. It's in Bukhari and Muslim. It's there. Two narrations. It says, when the Nabi ﷺ مر بحجر وكان يسلم عليه يقول السلام عليك يا رسول الله حجر وفي رواية حجر بمكة كان يسلم على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فيقول له السلام عليك يا رسول الله. Allah has created things from the creation that don't have body parts, and they still have the characteristics of certain affairs or certain characteristics, such as speech. When do we know a rock to have jaws, lips, teeth, blood, tongue, all of those things in order to speak? Doesn't at all. It says in the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed by a rock that used to give him salams. A rock. It's Bukhari and Muslim. They used to say, Salamu alayka, O Messenger of Allah. There's a rock in Mecca. When do we know a rock to have teeth, jaws, tongue, blood, gums, larynx to the back of the throat? All of these matters. None, not one of these characteristics, or none of these parts, none of these so-called parts. And it still had the characteristic of what? Speech. Also, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they heard on the Sahaba, the hadiths in Muslim, on more than one occasion. On more than one occasion. They used to hear the glorification of the food in the hands of the Messenger of Allah. They used to hear the tasbih, al-ta'am. Subhanallah, 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 Subhanallah. Food. They said on more than one occasion we heard the tasbih of the food in the hands of the Messenger of Allah. When do we know food to have teeth, jaws, blood, lips to speak? They don't. Another thing, a third thing, we can go on and on with this. Third thing, during the time of the Sahaba, they also heard the crying of a what? The jidh' of the nakhl. The moan of the nakhl, of the jidh' nakhl, on the nakhl. The nakhla that the Messenger of Allah used to give, the khutbah on the minbar. The date palm. And it started crying. And he heard the moan. He heard the weeping of it. And they said, we heard it. We heard the weeping of it. And they was trying to figure out, where's the crying coming from? It was coming from where? A date palm. When do we know a date palm to have eyes, tears, gums, teeth? Doesn't. And it still had the characteristic of what? Speech, where you heard the sound of what was weeping, it was crying. And it didn't have anything of these different types of characteristics that the human being what? Needs to have its what? characteristics. That's something that Allah created. How about the Creator Himself? So that's the reason why we do not say that the face of Allah is like the what? Face of the human being. Even though we affirm it in the general sense of the meaning. That's it. These are things that Allah created. Another thing that Allah created that will speak, such as your skin on the day of resurrection. حتى إذا جاءوها شهد عليهم سمعهم وأبصارهم وجلودهم بما كانوا يعملون قالوا لجلودهم لما شهدتم علينا قالوا أنطقنا الله الذي أنطق كل شيء وهو خلقكم أول مرة وإليه ترجعون وما كنتم تستترون أن يشهد عليكم سمعكم ولا أبصاركم ولا جلودكم ولكن ظننتم أن الله لا يعلم كثيرا مما تعملون وذلكم ظنكم الذي ظننتم بربكم أرداكم فأصبحتم من الخاسرين. To the end of the ayah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in this book, that the skins are talking like this, speech, your skin. Wow, it's time to close out already. We have to stop. We'll stop here. Finish up the ayah. He said, until they will come on the day of resurrection, shahida alaykum sam'ukum wa absarukum wa juludukum bima kanu ya'malun. On the day of resurrection, that their skin, their eyes, and their ears will testify, will speak. When do you know your eyes? Your eyes to have a mouth on it. Your eyes and your ears and your hearing to have that it has jaws, teeth, and a tongue to speak. But on the day of resurrection, they will what? They'll speak. Allah allowed to speak. Allah will say, Antiqi, speak. And the person's eyes will start to speak. Their hearing will start to speak. And their skin will start to speak. All of that will testify. May Allah give us a refuge. Al-Afiyah. Will testify against him. When do you know that all these affairs have jaws, teeth, tongue to speak? They don't. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to it what? Speak. And it will start to what? Speak. Another affair that speaks, that we don't know it to have a mouth, jaws, is the dunya, the earth itself. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned about this world on the day of resurrection, يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا بِأَنَّ رَبَّكَ أَوْحَى لَهَا. On the day when the earth will talk, this dunya that we're walking on right now will speak to Allah on the day of resurrection. It will inform of everything that has taken place on it. Why? Because your Lord has inspired it. When do we know that this whole world, there's somewhere located where you can find there's some blood flowing, there's some jaws, there's some teeth, Lord, somewhere. It's all nonsense. This is all what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. How about the Creator Himself? So that necessitates that His face does not, even though we affirm the general meaning, at the same time we say it's not like our what? Exactly. You understand? And He does not need anything like the human beings in order to have the characteristics. Like we said before, this principle. I hope you memorize this. I've said this 20 times. لوازم صفات المخلوق لا تستلزم صفات الخالق. لوازم صفات المخلوق لا تستلزم صفات الخالق. The lawazim of what the creation needs for their characteristics, Allah does not need it for what? His characteristics. Is it clear? Human beings need lungs and a heart to get upset. Allah does not need lungs and a heart to have the characteristic of anger. Allah does not need that. That's only what? for the human beings, not for the Creator. Understand, everyone? Fine, we'll stop here because we got to pray. Any questions about the lesson? We'll continue tomorrow. So let's finish this tomorrow, everyone. So keep in mind, memorize those 3 things you mentioned during the class. What's the meaning of Johar again? Johar. What? Meaning alone, it stands alone without any need of what? Exactly. Qa'imun bi nafsi. That's all you got to say. Something that's self-sufficient. Doesn't need anything. An arab is what? It's the opposite. Exactly. What's the third thing, though? What's the third thing? See, that's the reason why I tell you to write down. What was the third thing? Nice. No, what was the third thing? Doesn't matter. It could be before or last. Doesn't matter. I'm not looking for order. There was a third thing. What was it? It's easy. I said this 10 times. The origin of these words, that they should not be what? Exactly. That the origin of these words, that they're not to be what? They're not to be used. And if Ahl Bid'ah come to you, the people who have been affected by this rhetoric come to you, they're going to give you trick questions. They're going to say Allah is above. We're going to say my Lord sits. My Lord sits on the throne. I never said Allah sit. You said it. You used the word julus. You used the word sitting. That's what made you confused, because you used this word. That's the reason why you're sitting here confused. And that's the reason why you're sitting here denying that Allah is above. Because the word julus is a kalimatun ghayru warida fil kitab wa sunnah. First, the word julus is something that never came kitab and sunnah. Allah never used it for himself. That's number 1. Number 2, julus, that word necessitates what, everyone? Al-julus yaqtadi madha? Haja. Wallahu mustaghnin an kulli shay. Wa anna Allah bihaja ila madha? Raha. وراحة نقص في حق الرب سبحانه وتعالى من عدة نواحي ويدل على النقص والضعف في عدة صفات وأن قدرته ناقصة وعزته ناقصة وقوته ناقصة يحتاج إلى التجديد وإلى راحة وإلى نشاط وتجديد نشاط هذا كله باطل. So like we said, everyone, the word sit, number 1, why is it? First, is it come kitab and sunnah? Allah never used the word what? Sit. That's number 1. But you see the trick question? You see it? You say my Lord sits. I never said Allah sit. You said it. That's the reason why you're denying that Allah is above. Number 1, we don't say the word sit. And if we say the word sit, number 2, it necessitates that Allah is a what? Need. So that's a deficiency in regards to his ability and his strength and his power and his might. That's another thing. What need is that? That need is he needs rest. You understand? That he needs rest. The word rest, as it pertains to Allah, is a deficiency in a lot of characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From them is his ability. That shows it's a deficiency in his ability. That also shows his deficiency in his what? In his strength. And his power and his domination. That he gets what? Tired. You understand? That's the reason why we never use this word. And we say that these affairs implies what? Has false notions and false implications, like we just said. That Allah has a deficiency in his ability, subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the reason why we don't say the word what? Sit at all. We don't use it. You used it. But you notice they're trying to imply that as if you will say Allah, because Allah being above, that means that he sits. No, it doesn't. And what they're fleeing away from, they're falling into it. They say that you guys are resemblers. The reason why you fell into this is because in your mind, what did you do? You resembled Allah to creation. So what you're so-called trying to flee away from, you what? You fell into it. Huh? الباقلاني هذا هو الذي يحتاج إلى استفسار، لا أدري بالضبط، يحتاج إلى استفسار. الابن والأب، يعني هناك اثنان. إن رجعت غدا سأخبرك إن شاء الله. يعني هناك جويري، هناك اثنان. الابن نعم. لا أدري. عبد الجبار المعتزلي الهمداني. خلينا بكره ان شاء الله سنعلمك ان شاء الله، سنعلمك ان شاء الله باذن الله. طيب نكتفي بهذا القدر. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد. Anything else, anyone about the lesson? That's it. خلاص. See you tomorrow إن شاء الله. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك.